Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. It's time for this week's episode of One Last Thing with my co-host Slava Cooperstein. Slava, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Ken. We're rolling. We just had a fantastic, really comprehensive win against a good Texans team last week, and I'm just thrilled about it. Can't wait for the AFC Championship game.
I've looked at a little Texan stuff, in particular. My old partner from Syracuse, Charlie Polillo, is a big guy in Houston radio. Very, very positive about what's happening with the Texans, and I think there's every reason for them to come out of this game looking happy. Also, very, very realistic about the Ravens being the best team in football, and this is a team that got a little bit schooled in terms of the Texans by just a very good football team. So we're going to talk about a couple of things today, but I thought we'd start with there's been a lot of narratives that have been circulating about Lamar, circulating about the Ravens in general, a lot of things about the Ravens not coaching things properly, which really seem ridiculous at this point. But I thought we'd just have a little fun and talk about those for about 5 minutes here, just to lighten up the air a little bit and get the episodes. But this is a bad time to be a Lamar hater in this world.
It absolutely is. I mean, apparently some people after the Texans game have discovered that Lamar Jackson can, in fact, play the game of football. Some people still haven't quite gotten there yet, which is pretty remarkable to me. And they'll sort of cherry pick like aggregate stats like total passing yards or something like that as something to support their conclusions. But quite frankly, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that Lamar Jackson is the greatest force multiplier that the game of pro football has ever seen. Now, if you want to say he's not a top whatever passer of the ball, whatever you think that must mean, because he's not putting up 4,500 yards a game, and Patrick Mahomes, I think, is probably the unquestioned best passer of the football in the game, and I don't think that's controversial. The fact of the matter is, Lamar Jackson affects every facet of everything that happens on the football field, and this past weekend was a really great example of that.
Yep, it's very much the people who have espoused some of those theories about Lamar Jackson do not seem very analyst-y right now in terms of what they've done. So the Lamar can't win in the cold narrative. Now, I had my own concerns about Lamar because he's really never played in the cold. The only game he played under freezing was the game at Kansas City where they lost in overtime in his rookie year. But I thought that was one of the real nice things to come out of this game in terms of a broken narrative that might have really held some water. But Lamar had a difficult first half. And honestly, if you look at him as a passer, he didn't really live up to his opportunity set in the way he might have. But he sure as hell made up for it as a runner. I think he made up for it as a leader on the field. I thought one of the things that I just absolutely loved was him not taking Ronnie Stanley's hand on the field and getting pissed off at him directly. Stanley did not engage in his block quickly enough. Lamar ended up getting taken down before it meant anything, and he was pissed about it.
Yeah, no, Lamar was very animated throughout the game. I can't say necessarily. I mean, I think there were some times where I would probably, I hope he reflects on some of those things and, after the heat of the moment and sort of goes to his guys and, and they kind of share an understanding of like what's going on, because Lamar has a tremendous amount of pressure riding on him. And we're all human and all of that. But, I hope that this is something that, he continues to grow. You can't win, I think, when it comes to how much you emote on the field if you're a particular player, because if you are sort of more stoic like Joe Flacco, they're going to say that you don't care.
Yep.
If you're getting in everybody's face all the time, they're going to call you a bad teammate or whatever. I think Lamar has a good understanding. Him and Ronnie are close. He has a good understanding of like what people are going to respond to. But I do think that's an opportunity to grow. But he was definitely a very fiery, competitive player in the game.
How about another thing is that it's no longer an issue for you?
Oh my God, rest versus rust. I mean, that one is just, I mean, it blew my mind the entire time. I mean, this is such a Baltimore specific one, just because we've had a couple of first round bye tremendous. Two of the three worst losses that the Ravens have ever faced: 2006, 2019. Were home games after a bye. I'm not sure. You're putting
the Lee Evans game as number 3.
To me, Lee Evans, that's number 1 personally to me, because of the dramatic nature in which it happened. Like, everything fell apart all at once. I just think that a lot of people still point to 2006 and 2019, while disappointing. We never really got to exercise those demons in the way, like, to me, the Super Bowl season from 2012 began with Billy Cundiff missing that field goal. Like, that's how that season started. I don't buy that had we won in 2011, we would have won in 2012. Like, all that stuff is nonsense to me. It just seemed like such an immediate, I just remember, if you remember, Suggs, his face and him just mouthing, "Oh my God," it was such a deflating, horrible moment. But in any event, 2 home playoff games lost, and of course the Ravens, both their Super Bowl runs, they played the majority of the games on the road. And feeds into this, like, bullies of Baltimore will go in anywhere, will punch them out. It is, people act like it's unknowable that having a week off is a good thing to rest after a season of football. People act like it's unknowable that having an automatic win in the first round of the playoffs is a good thing
with no possibility of injury in that game. Yeah, I mean, it does seem absurd right now, and I don't want people to forget 2006 or 2019 as part of being a Ravens fan and understanding the history of the team, knowing how we felt after those losses after a bye. I mean, it was terrible. Those were 2 of the most deflating days in team history. I'm really bothered by the 2011 loss, but I think it's number 3 for me. The 2 others were terrible because those were teams. The 2016 was absolutely favored to win the Super Bowl at the moment they lost that game. They'd already they got in the home. They get the home game later that day. They find out anyway. They also found out. They found it at other times, like in 2010 with the loss at Pittsburgh from a 2-touchdown lead. They found out that they would have played the AFC Championship at home later. There have been some terrible losses. All those things are going to stick with the Ravens. They're going to be a significant part of team lore. But I think the Ravens finally get a break from that right now. We don't have to talk about that till the next time it's about to happen. It's pretty much the way I feel about it. I'm very happy that one is in the back seat. Let me toss out another one there, because I think the coordinators had kind of 2 of them were circulating around them. The first is distraction of the coordinators. The notion that these guys are all getting phone calls and, wait, hold on. I can't practice right now. I've got an interview. It's like all of that was not going to be juggleable by a couple of guys who obviously had some of their best games this week. Yeah.
I think I still think it's a horrible system, because I just think it does terrible things to a person where they have to burn the candle at both ends. It's really not fair. It's punishing teams who are doing well, because they're the ones that, people naturally want to poach their coordinators. But it's not about, certainly not about like this idea that I think anybody who's thinking, like, these guys aren't doing everything that they're supposed to be doing in a given day because they're prepping for these interviews. I think that's wild. Like, that's such a ridiculous, thing to think. But what I think what it does do is force the person to just divert some of their energy and some of their like just capacity to like, rest is important, sleep is important, thinking about your family is important, and I wish the NFL would reconsider how they do that. All that said, like you said, these two coaches delivered arguably, for my money, I think this was the best defensive performance of the entire season. I don't care about like sacks and turnovers, all that's like really nice, but when you don't even get to the red zone, when you're a red hot team that just took the Browns to the woodshed and did what they did to them, and you don't even get to the red zone, I think that's remarkable. I think when we get to sort of talking about what lessons we learned a little bit, I do have some thoughts on the offensive performance in the first half, and maybe some adjustments that could have been made earlier. But there's no denying that everything Monken pushed all of the right buttons coming out at halftime. I mean, 24 unanswered points. You can't argue with that.
Yeah, it's just that avalanche, that 24-0 avalanche, really ends any question about adjustments. I actually got a I don't remember if it was a tweet or a DM, but it was one of the two. I believe it may be out there in general Twitter. That said basically it had added me, which is something, if you want somebody's opinion about it, you do obviously in Twitter, and it said something like, this is the end of the 2023 Ravens. They're not able to make adjustment. Harbaugh is through, but and, I was actually a little bit down at halftime too, and I think I actually saw it later that day when I got home, the tweet. But I was a little bit down at halftime. I admit I might have had some of those feelings myself, but boy, what an overreaction as it turned out in terms of the second half.
My nephew, I was watching with him and a couple other family members, and a good point he made was like, we were all feeling down naturally. It's like not the way you want to start the game, particularly with that kickoff return. He said, look, we probably played about as poorly on offense in terms of like, total output in the first half, not as we could have, right? Because we could have had turnovers, but pretty poor offensive showing in the first half. And it's still tied 10-10. Like that was probably as badly as we were reasonably going to do. And it's still tied 10-10. And I thought that was good perspective, because it's like, if you just, if a couple things just come together in the second half, you're going to run away with this thing.
Well, the Texans fans on the other side of that say, as bad as we played in this first half offensively, we haven't got inside the 25-yard line. We haven't done anything. They've had the ball for most of the first half, although they've been dominating and we're still tied 10-10 is their perspective on it. Sure. And I think that was more how I looked at it at the time, was that, this is not a good place. This game's not supposed to be close. It would be nice if this went away, but the adjustments, absolutely fantastic. And I think we can toss those narratives once and for all. These guys probably each improved their chance slightly to become head coaches. The chances have been going steadily down since the head coaches openings first became known in full. And obviously a lot of those jobs are now gone. And I think there's now probably more than a 60% chance they retain both coordinators at this point. I don't think Weaver is going anywhere, and I'm not aware of anybody at a lower level who's really being considered.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty good chance. I mean, just the numbers are not working against him. You got to think that the Slowick and Johnson over from the Lions, they've just been consistently named as hot coordinator options, and assuming Belichick, Vrabel, and Jim Harbaugh take up some slots, the numbers are just not favoring to otherwise excellent coordinators, as well as Anthony Weaver.
Right. Yeah, I think, and Callahan is apparently going to be signed. The Bengals guy is apparently going to be signed for the Titans job. That's what I've heard in the last 24 hours. So yeah. All right, terrific. Let's move on to I think what is the meat and potatoes of this show, which is things we learned from the win against the Texans. Maybe some things that are portable into the Chiefs game. But even if we just learned them here, let's have a go. We're going this ad hoc. Take a item you'd like to talk about from that game that you think is a revelation of sorts?
Yeah, I think it's just continued proof that that McDonald's sort of don't panic approach is really the right way to go for his system. Even when not that there was anything necessarily to panic about, but McDonald wasn't worried about the fact that he wasn't getting sacks. He wasn't worried about the fact that there weren't turnovers or that CJ Stroud picked up some very impressive 3rd and longs, like under some difficult conditions. I think that CJ Stroud and the Texans offense, I think they were specifically really coaching to say, like, avoid turnovers at all costs, even I think maybe to the detriment of some offensive output, right? Just being so like risk averse. Mm-hmm. But it's understandable, particularly with a rookie, to kind of take that tack. And McDonald was very patient. He could see that pressure was getting to CJ Stroud, and even though they didn't make it home, he didn't feel the need to sort of stray from what was working, and understood that over the course of the game, the balance of everything, that it was going to favor the Ravens to kind of remain steady in that particular manner.
Yeah, I'm gonna piggyback on that for just a minute and just say it's amazing the pressure was as effective as it was, and they had a 42% pressure rate in this game, the ball out quick ATS pressure spectrum, which is right on line with their season totals. They didn't have a sack, but they did have that intentional grounding that is effectively a 10-yard sack. Just should count the same as far as I'm concerned. Sure. And then the other thing is just that the pressure was very effective. They forced Stroud to leave the pocket. Somebody's asking me how many times did he throw the ball away under pressure, and I mean, there's 8 easy ones that I found that I put up in a tweet. There's 3 others that you could claim those were cases where he really threw the ball away. One time it was close enough to the receiver. One time it was over the receiver's head. But pressure had a big impact on Stroud. It wasn't like they got no sacks. Oh my, that's a very surface level statistic. If you're really looking at impact, it's just incredibly rare that you have a really good pressure game like this and you don't get any sacks. That's just very rare, and even more rare that you don't get any sacks and any turnovers. You get the Ravens' history. There's not a whole lot of games like that, and there's probably none where the Ravens played as well defensively on the game. In fact, I'd be very surprised if we could find one looking together. But I did happen to look at 2000 and 2023. There's no such game in either year that has 0 sacks or 0 turnovers. So there's no denominator to work from.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's very unusual. I do think, again, that it goes to sort of how Stroud was coached. I mean, they just said, throw it away. Don't put us in bad situations. We don't want these 12 and or 2nd and long, 3rd and super long, situations. And largely they stayed out of them, but it wasn't just wasn't enough. It was just too disciplined, too effective. It's like just a death by a million paper cuts. From the defensive side, we're just gonna chip away, and you're not gonna get past us.
All right, I'll go on with a second thing, and that's I think that Hamilton's return was enormous for this defense. Even though he didn't put up chart-topping numbers in this particular game, he made some nice downhill plays, did a very good job taking away the strong side of the field as he does horizontally and has effectively. Aaron Schatz posted something today on Twitter saying that the Ravens would be better off staying in base defense against the Chiefs' 12 personnel because teams have done better with base than they have against nickel, I guess, and that might very well be true. I don't doubt for a minute that Aaron is reporting the information correctly. It's just the Ravens have a different guy playing slot cornerback than anybody else, and so when they can effectively put a massive linebacker out there like Hamilton, who gives you all kinds of value coverage, pass rush, and block shedding in terms of horizontal play, I think that's even better than the typical nickel guy who's often in there against Kelsey, and Kelsey, he's a bad matchup for almost anybody in the National Football League. I think we're going to find he's not a bad matchup at all I think, let me put it differently. I think Hamilton will do better against him than just about anybody else he's faced.
Yeah, I agree. And that's even after seeing what to me looked like Kelsey's best game of the year last week.
Yeah.
Kelsey looked to be moving about as well as he had.
Frustrating to see him put it together, but then on the other hand, the Kansas City's looking at Ronnie Stanley getting it together at the same time. I will toss out there that Hamilton on the season now, 4.03 yards per target. He was 0 for 2. They were 0 for 2 throwing at him in this game. That's just an outstanding number. And when you consider the fact that he's a lot of the time he's a slot corner there, he's facing guys who have elusive yards after the catch ability, a fair amount of those throws when he's on the safety and he's on the back end. He gives up a throw, it's going to be a pretty long one in general. It's just a remarkable number for a player like Hamilton to have. So outstanding.
Yeah. No question there. And I think that would be a good, just to piggyback on what you said. I mean, what a time to have Ronnie Stanley turn in his absolute best game of the season. And he just looked like the Ronnie Stanley of old, I think I saw you tweet something like, I don't want to put too much stock in a single game. And, I agree, but this is, again, another knock on rest versus rust, right? Like Ronnie Stanley needed that time and he looked so much better. I mean, he looked literally better than he has since, last year when he had turned it around, just anchoring and, not really giving up any ground.
Flexible, more mobile. And, the big thing with Ronnie is he's always been a great mirror. That was his trademark ability, was to have this fantastic ability to mirror the moves of your opponent. And in the past, he's always kind of giving up a little bit of ground for great mirror has been something that's worked very well with Lamar. And Lamar takes bump pressure from that side or even feels pressure well as it's coming in. But he can always trust Ronnie to keep the guy's hands off him, because he's not getting beat to the edge. He's not, generating a ton of holding penalties on that side. That really hadn't been the case so far this year. Be giving way more ground per mirror value obtained. Let's put it that way, per amount of mirroring accomplished. And that had been a bad trade-off. This is what really shows up in this game is he's getting good blocks mirrored well. Far away from Ronnie on the outside, which is far away from Lamar on the outside, which is really fantastic and just a big difference. Looks flexible, looks able to get into level 2 and move around. I mean, what we had seen from Stanley in terms of lining up a guy in space, we had not seen often. And you'll often hear me talk about offensive linemen who get lungy in level 2. Well, this is what I mean by that. They're not patient in terms of lining up their prey. I think Ronnie was a little over patient on that play in the first half, and Lamar kind of got pissed off at him in the second half. The 2 blocks he made, the one on Grenard, he didn't even have that great a block on him, but he impeded him enough with an outstretched arm that it gave Jackson all he needed to get by. And then, of course, the one, that poor defensive back whose number we shall never know because he was just crushed under the weight of Ronnie, was a great one.
Yeah, that was a great comeback for Ronnie. Something else I wanted to talk about was I think in the first half, Monken could have done a little bit more to adjust to how much the pass rush was getting at Lamar, and particularly like Lamar got like crushed on one sack, like really hard. And, it's a little disappointing, particularly in recent weeks where they'd had not necessarily too many like hot read guys, but more like chip blockers that kind of leak out and become receiving options. Something like that, or having a guy who's hot would have done a tremendous amount to stem that pass rush. Hard to argue 34 points. Obviously in the aggregate, but as Ravens players know, or Ravens fans know, the 2 times that Lamar has gotten significantly injured, actually 3 times if you consider the concussion, in the playoff game, was from the pocket. in a passing situation. And number eight's health is paramount. I think, if the pass rush is getting home and you don't necessarily have time to make the major adjustments that you would at halftime, just a couple hot reads, I think would do a lot to stem the tide of the pass rush.
Yeah, could call a play where the ball is out quickly. And part of it honestly was that they did get sacked once earlier in that first half, and they had another one that was like a sack plus one. So they had 2 sacks, and then they had 2 sacks on like their final 2 plays of the first half. It wasn't quite the final 2. It was like first down, second down on their final drive where they then had a running play on third down. So you didn't have any pass that occurred in the first half after those last 2 sacks. But there was enough evidence in terms of what they were doing with 5-man pressure. 21 out of 25 times the Texans rushed 5+ in this game. I've never seen anything like it, or at least I can't remember ever an 84% game. The closest analogy I can come up with is that miserable Thursday night in Miami where they faced a 40 cover 0 looks. And they had all the pass rush was a nightmare all night. In this case, the Texans held the Ravens to 1 net yard in the first half on 6 5-man rushes. In the second half, from the very first play, that wasn't the case. And they had 6 plays for 63 yards, 10.5 yards per play whenever the Texans rushed 5. So they really figured out how to punish the Texans in that regard in the second half. And that was such an amazing turnaround between H1 and H2. I can't think of many times where I've seen something better in terms of an adjustment.
For sure. Yeah, definitely worked out in the end. Let me ask you this. Do you have concerns about special teams, which was the real disappointment of the game?
That's a great question. I haven't studied that in the same way I study offense and defense. So when people ask me special teams questions, I always have to be a little sheepish. So I've seen the video. I've watched it a couple of times, but I haven't watched it to see, this L4 guy is out of position, or, why did this injury occur? When I haven't watched it to that level of detail. Now, am I concerned that the Ravens had some rush lane issues come up at a big time like this? Sure, as much as anybody else. Am I concerned that there were, a shank in the punt game, or there were some other things? Sure. Am I really happy that Justin Tucker kicked a 53-yard field goal? Sure. It was a hard kick to make. I don't know that I have anything really profound to say about special teams in this game. They endured 2 Trindon Holiday touchdowns in the Mile High Miracle game a few years back, of course. I don't think they've quite held up the standard of being the Ravens on special teams in the playoffs over their history. They've given up. They gave up another touchdown return, obviously, in the Super Bowl. They did have one themselves also. But in terms of being a kick coverage unit in the playoffs, this is at least the 4th touchdown they've given up in 29 playoff games they've had. That's not particularly good.
It's funny, isn't it, though, Ken? Whenever anybody wants to talk about the Mile High Miracle, all they want to talk about is Raheem Moore, and not the fact that we spotted the Peyton Manning-led Broncos 2 special teams touchdowns. Yeah. I mean, I think a kick return can happen at any given moment. I think I'm a little more concerned about Stout's performance. Shanked one, and then I think in another kick he really outkicked the coverage. But at the end of the day, I think there have been bad special teams games earlier in the season that were followed up by cleaner games. So I think they'll get it coached up. I'm just glad that it didn't really come back to bite us in any significant way.
Yeah.
What did you think of the secondary in this game?
By and large, I'm obviously happy with the way the game worked out. The secondary is probably as much responsible, at least in terms of the success, being in the proper position to take care of what Stroud did. I thought there were a fair number of plays. One where Hamilton was converging on a flat route, I remember, where it just looked like Stroud really threw to avoid Hamilton on the play. And I think there was a lot of that during the game. They grounded a ball at the feet of Mollett once. So the secondary did a really good job of being in position. Ronald Darby, I think he did allow one big play early for 26, 29, 23, or whatever it was. But the rest of the game, he looked pretty damn good. I thought that Williams on the back end looked good in terms of being in the right place. And that's part of, laying that cloud over the defense. The one guy I'm a little concerned about right now is Brandon Stevens. He's not playing his best football right now. For everything to be going as right it is, Moses and Stanley peaking at exactly the right time, the defense still, having its best game of the year, arguably. And for Stevens not to be playing his best football is really good. But here's my concern about Brandon Stevens. I can summarize pretty quickly. He's been targeted 18 times in the last 3 ball games, and one of those was against Pittsburgh in the rain, where he only got 1 target and it was incomplete. He's otherwise had 18 targets total over the 3 games, 179 yards. That's 9.9 yards per play. That's pretty bad. And he's also picked up 3 penalties in the last 4 games, where that's something he'd avoided the whole year. So if I had one player I'm mildly concerned about right now, it's that. And since that's also a position where injury and lack of availability has been an issue, I think the Ravens really need to go into this game against the Chiefs, making sure that they have a third safety active to maintain that slot cornerback flexibility. They cannot be put in a position where an injury on the back end, either Stone or Williams, impacts where Hamilton can play. So if there's anything, if a safety is not one of the 2 guys they elevate, or they don't otherwise make a move to elevate a safety to 53, or they haven't in secret made Ardarius Washington into a great safety that we can depend on, I don't want to hear any excuse for the Ravens not being able to play somebody else other than Hamilton on the back end when they want Hamilton at slot corner.
But Ken, how will we get by without Dan Chisena?
There you go.
In the game. Surely you wouldn't suggest not elevating him. And to great effect on special teams, as we saw. I agree. I think it's all hands on deck for the secondary. I made the point on Twitter earlier in the week that I think when you're worried that you don't have your number, a 4th outside corner, and you only have your 3 options that are all pretty good. Yeah. You're in a good spot. But we sure could use Marlon Humphrey back there, and not just on the outside, but also when he brings a lot in the slot corner position as well. And so if you're not losing as much when you're putting Hamilton back. Further back when you've got Marlon in the slot, and Mollett, of course, is just coming off a great game. But your point is well taken. I mean, I would load up on secondary depth as much as possible. I can't imagine that anybody else on the practice squad is going to give you as much important positional flexibility as a DB and in particular a safety would.
Yeah, like Adams. And so they have the guy. He's a long-term NFL safety. It's not a potential shot in the dark card like Lucien is. And Lucien got released again. I hope he's back with the Ravens at some point. But this is not somebody we're taking a big chance on. They pretty much know who Adams is at this point in his career. He's 30, 31 years old. He's been in the NFL for a long time. I mean, they don't have to worry about who he is. They probably know him not quite as well as they knew who Worley was, but Worley was perfectly fine within the scheme. Really, was perfectly serviceable. Was more than adequate playing that strong safety role when they wanted to move Hamilton up.
A really good division of responsibility in that scheme between the 2 safeties and between the safety and the respective corner that they're giving help to. Anything else you think we learned from this one?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about what game this reminds me most of, and that's something I kind of think about when we see a one-sided defensive performance. The game I think this reminds me most of is Super Bowl 35. And it's a little weird because that game had 5 turnovers and 4 sacks. And the defense didn't allow a point. They allowed a kickoff return to Dixon, but they didn't allow a point in that game. But the other thing that was in common between the two games is no snaps inside the 25 either time, and they're holding the Texans without a single red zone trip. My new favorite mantra is the best percentage, the best red zone percentage your opponent can have is undefined.
Yep, 0 divided by 0.
Yeah, there you go. So, so if you give them 0 red zone trips, you give them a lot less good chances to score. So that was just I loved, Super Bowl 35 was a surreal, magical day of football for me. In some ways, it was almost not unexpected, but then all these things kept happening, and the Giants could do nothing time after time, and then the confetti started going up in the air. That was pretty fantastic too. So great day, just a great game.
The real difference is that CJ Stroud is, I think, much more careful with the ball than Kerry Collins is.
Yes.
So that can account for some things like interceptions and however many tip balls Ray Lewis had. But it is very similar to that, going all the way down to a kickoff return for a touchdown that everybody thought, oh, okay, this could be the galvanizing, whatever. But instead of our, answering with a kickoff return for a touchdown ourselves, we get the ball in the second half. Lamar marches it straight down. And honestly, I don't know how you felt at that moment, but when Lamar marched it down, and that was a great drive, just 3 minutes of just, effective football, I started to feel pretty good at that point.
Yeah, well, me too. The other point at which I felt like we're not losing this football game was after the 4th and 1 conversion. That was a very high leverage play. They were up 17-10, I believe, when that happened. It was a good go for it. It's one of those ones that there's no question about taking too much risk on a single play, which I brought up at times. No doubt about it in that particular case. And a great conversion on the play, great play call, and great individual play from Stanley to get out in front and make that nice block in space, and Lamar to take advantage of it.
That actually reminds me of one more thing I think that we can take away from this game is Monken continues to do a couple of sort of tendency breakers, a little bit in particular. I think it was on the 4th and 1, but it could have been on another play where Ricard, is going out right, and of course that the entire defense flows to Ricard because they think that's where the ball carrier is going to go, and Lamar just rolls out to the left and picks up the first down, and just like little things like that. He's clearly saying like, okay, there's going to be 1, 2, 3 spots in the game where I'm going to bring out something that is just gonna have the defense flat-footed, and I'm going to be patient and wait until we need one of those things. And he's done it to great effect. And I think we can look forward to that next week.
Yeah. It's, if we're talking about one other thing about the offense, I've thought of one additional as well, is the Ravens run well against teams that don't allow much in the way of running. And the Texans certainly were that. They were the number 2 team in the entire NFL in terms of defensive DVOA against the run. Okay, so they were a team that prided itself on being a good run defense team. And over the years, it hasn't mattered. During the Lamar era, whether it's been the Steelers or other good run defenses around the league during that time, the Ravens have been able to run on all of them. And since Lamar's rookie year. And it's, I think I know the reason, it's that the most great run defenses are set up to deal with gap and zone run schemes. And it could be either that they're particularly good at. They may have real fast players that beat zone schemes. They may have big, stout linemen who are good against gap schemes. They can be good at either or both. But the third element that the Ravens bring to this is just a tremendous amount of misdirection in their run game. It really showed up on 4th and 1, but it shows up at other times too. Certainly shows up in terms of pass rush integrity is something you need to hold the Ravens down under the Fangio line. If any team was ever able to do that, to hold them under 100 yards, that's will take you controlling Lamar Jackson from the pocket.
I really like calling it the Fangio line.
Yes, I do too.
It's the perfect amount of petty for me. So I'm gonna probably call it that forever. But yeah, so let's. I think the other big one that we need to sort of cover is the Chiefs. Defeating the Bills. proving, I guess we learned that Patrick Mahomes is capable of winning a road playoff game, much the way that Lamar is capable of winning at home. So, that's one thing we learned. But also, I think it was a good time for the Chiefs to probably put together what looked like the most cohesive offensive performance that I've seen this year. Receivers who haven't been stepping up much this year, not named Rashee Rice, coming up with a couple of good grabs. Travis Kelce looking the best that he's looked, but also, still having some of these foibles, like when they really could have put their foot on the throat of the Bills, but then they fumble into the end zone, which was a tremendous mistake at that juncture in the game. I mean, that if you were a Bills fan, you had to be thinking, okay, now's our chance.
Yeah. That was an absolute gift that Buffalo could not take advantage of in terms of the exchange of the football there on both sides. So the fake punt right before it, and then the fumble. Yeah. I mean, look, Kansas City's got to be feeling really good about this. It honestly, even though it's a gorilla they've never faced in terms of playing a road playoff game, it was a question that was unanswered about this team. And they went into a difficult, hostile environment, and they won a football game close. They didn't destroy the Bills. I think the Bills in some ways didn't play terrific football. Certainly Allen didn't have his best game, but Allen also didn't turn the ball over much. Did he have one interception this game, or did he have none?
Nothing that jumps out to me as far as turnovers, but I could check the box.
Yeah, I got to go back to that myself too, because I want to get my narratives right. I want to make sure that I'm talking about the right thing. But I don't remember him having an interception. He might have had one at the very end. Nope, no interceptions. Okay. So, but he also threw 39 passes for 186 yards. So the Ravens are going to have to figure out how to solve the Bills secondary. And one of the things I look for them to do is remain very multiple in this game. And I'll leave a lot of this for the matchups show. But I do look for the Ravens to try and run the football and try and remain the two-headed offensive monster they've been very effectively with Monken. By the way, could you be more happy? Okay, how happy are you on a scale of 1 to 10? Rather than trying to lead the witness, I know you wouldn't like that. In terms of Monken's willingness to fold in run and pass concepts when he was not thought to be a guy, thought to be more of a vertical passing game guy.
An 11, I think. Monken. It goes back to everything that we said at the start of the season about the qualities that I look for in a coach. I want the coach to look at what he's got and say, what is going to be my best, how do I put the talent that I have into the best position to succeed? And he's delivered. I mean, you got Lamar Jackson, likely has locked up his, second MVP season and withstood some really significant injuries as far as, inconsistent health along the offensive line throughout the year, but also losing Andrews and J.K. Dobbins and Keaton Mitchell, and all of that, and sort of not really missing a beat. It really been excellent. But I think it's also we shouldn't react too much. I think you give Kansas City their due. They went into a very tough environment, but they also played against a Bills team that was extremely injured on defense.
Yes.
And that Bills team gave Kansas City pretty much everything. I mean, it was a missed field goal from being a tie game, right? And even before that, on that drive, Josh Allen made some really baffling decisions. He had two. Instead of trying to pick up the first down, which would have been better anyways. I mean, in terms of running down the clock, he took like some two long shots down the down in the end zone to guys not named Diggs, and instead of looking at like wide open receivers who are a little bit closer. And I think that the way that the Ravens defense has been very disciplined about going to feeding different receivers, right? You don't have anybody who's like a stat monster in the receiving core because everybody's been getting the ball at different junctures. I think that'll serve the Ravens well against the Chiefs. Also Allen had a pretty good game running the ball, and
yes.
That's something that the Chiefs are going to have to be very concerned about, is Lamar taking off and running.
Yeah, total different dimension as a player. The missed field goal, one of the delicious ironies of this whole thing, and I don't like the Buffalo Bills. I don't like them. I don't like the Chiefs either for different reasons, but I don't like the Bills. The wide right entering the Bills lexicon for a second time is just wonderful. And the fact that the announcer immediately picking up on it and kind of making fun of it in real time. The two worst words in Buffalo, wide right. And it's been 33 years. You want to feel a little old since Scott Norwood missed wide right to lose Super Bowl 25. They lost the game 20-19. For folks that are a little younger, hey, you might not know. It was Super Bowl 25. The Bills lost it 20-19 to the Giants. And they had a chance to kick the winning field goal with seconds remaining, and they missed it wide right from 47 yards. And Scott Norwood, the kicker, obviously. So the second wide right, the second incarnation of wide right, it's gonna really stick in the craw of Bills fans for years to come, and it reanimates a long dead ghost.
Yeah, no, it's tough, and I feel bad for that fan base, but I will. Hopefully we can take down their hated foe and give Kansas City some horrible phrase that they can repeat in their head over and over.
All right, Slava, always a pleasure talking football with you. Tell folks where they can find you online.
I'm on Twitter at Slava Cooperstein. That's SLAVA KUPERSTEIN.
Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a film study short, hit me up. There is time still, potentially, before the Super Bowl. If you have a topic you'd like to talk about, hit me up with that. I will not be entertaining Pro Bowl topics, even if that's where the Ravens are, in a week and a half or 11 days or so. But I'd love to hear some Super Bowl topics if they're appropriate, and I'll get back to you very quickly. Also looking for off-season content you'd like to do. In particular, if you have the project that's 2 or 3 parts that has to be done, love to hear from you about that. Also, DMs are always open. I'll get back to you very quickly.
You don't want to talk about Adalys Thomas's all-time Pro Bowl performance? You don't want to make an episode of that,
Yeah, I don't think so. And for Saga Cooperstein, this is Ken McCusick saying goodbye. I'll talk to you next week on One Last Thing.